Putin again and again attacks Ukrainian kindergartens and continues to threaten the American president with Tomahawks. This and other topics we will discuss right now. My name is Lova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report in English, and also Rashkin News. Yuri, hello, glad to see you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I'd like to begin our conversation by extending my condolences and support to everyone in Lviv and all over Ukraine that suffered under last night's horrendous attacks. Putin is attacking small businesses. He's attacking people. He's not attacking. He's not moving by attacking Ukrainian military. He's attacking people, and we need to just start by acknowledging that.
Thank you for your support and for your words. Yes, again, we had very difficult, dangerous, hard night for all Ukrainian regions, for example, for our western regions. And we saw that Russian dictator Putin attacks Lviv with 78 drones and 12 missiles. In Lapaivka, about 10 private houses, usual private houses, were damaged. 4 people were killed and 3 others are currently hospitalized and receiving medical assistance. What are Putin's key goals in such attacks, and how should US President Donald Trump react as Putin once again ignores all of Trump's peace efforts?
Well, there's several different points there, and I think that for starters, we're seeing, to me, as this is a statement of weakness by Putin. All of the last few days have been taken up by conversations about whether Ukraine is going to get Tomahawks or not, even though presence of Tomahawks also requires, a submarine or a ship to launch it from. But I think that this administration could probably sell both at a discount, for like a group discount, if you buy both Tomahawk and a submarine, or at least rent it, and then promise to put it back. I think that this is not a conversation Vladimir Putin wants to have. Vladimir Putin was seeing a conversation where for 3+ years, he was the monster. Ukraine was the weak victim that everybody needs to support, not because Ukraine is strong, but because Ukraine is right. And to Putin, that has always been a losing way to look at things, because might beats right. Might means right. And so all of these, statements and whatever you want to describe them as by Ukrainians about all the civilians that are being killed are just highlight how weak Ukraine is from Putin's point of view. And then all of a sudden, the rhetoric changed. We saw that President Trump acknowledged the strength of Ukraine, the successes of Ukraine, the weakness of Russia, the power tiger that is Russia, the paper tiger that is on fire now, that is Russia. So for Putin, unfortunately, that means that he had to change the conversation. And so now we can take a look, and because there's, amazingly enough, there's always more horrendous things that Putin can do that he hasn't done yet. And of course, that's part of his logic. Don't make me do those things. But, getting rid of Hitler was required for survival of civilization. And when dictators feel cornered, when dictators feel weak, that's when they go for the worst things that they can do, because they're sending a very strong message, where they're trying to send a strong message that they're committed to this thing called being in power, and then they lose. So I think that this is a conversation that was very important, but it's also a conversation that's conducted in different ways, in different levels. We see Putin conducting his conversation through making threatening statements in the UN, and at the same time sending or attacking Western Ukraine, which is normally routinely safe, considered to be, because it is really far away from the front lines. Ukraine is a big country. So when we're dealing with these kinds of attacks and these kinds of statements, that's Putin saying, I'm a barbarian, I'm a vandal, just like I ever was. Okay, great. And how do we see the conversation on the other side? We see bold, encouraging, inspirational messages from President Trump. And as Ukrainians and everybody else now in the world says, that we see some action. Because when we see words, we are used to seeing big, powerful words from this administration. In fact, I have never seen a president use his personal influence as much for things small and little, for whether it is pressuring Prime Minister of Israel to call Qatar and apologize to them on the phone in public, or pressuring a restaurant chain to not change their logo because he has an opinion about it. This is a very unprecedented way of inserting precedent into everything. But at the same time, where actions are coming from Ukraine, because Ukraine is being tremendously successful by setting Russia on fire. And that's really been the best news we've seen in a long time. And it's consistent. And we don't see even those, there's those no deaths that are being reported, or, we're seeing the oil refineries, the gas refineries being set on fire. And that is a message that is so powerful. On some level, I feel like it gives Taiwan hope of how it can withstand a Chinese invasion should one occur, because you can send drones and you can take power out of the sails, wind out of the sails of your opponent, even this way. So I think that there's new horizons and new opportunities that are being explored, but they're being explored by people who are doing it out of desperation because their big partner, United States, is not doing what it's supposed to. Words are great, but we need to see some actions, because until then, we also see actually the attack on Lviv as a response to words that were uttered by President about Tomahawks, because he's been thinking about sending Tomahawks, because I think President Trump thinks that if he can do it in a roundabout way, that Putin is not going to notice and take offense to it. And that's why it was so interesting to see Putin's statement in Valdai conference, where he was very clear that if, Tomahawks are launched at Russia, Russia will, this will ruin this will hurt the relationship. Russia will notice, don't do it. So I think in this love affair that we're just watching between two elderly men, then really I feel like Putin is almost in a condition, like being stalked by Trump here on some level. It's imagine serial killer who's being stalked by somebody who adores them and wants to be like them. Is this a comedy or a tragedy, or is this a new Netflix series? I'm not sure. But this is the situation where we're at, where Russia responds barbarically to this kind of a wondering statement by President of the United States of whether we should actually just give more weapons. Why, by the way? Because United States is not planning on attacking Russia. There is no war that is anticipated by America against Russia. It's very clear, unfortunately, even to our allies, who know that no matter what they do, no matter what Putin does, Trump is going to sit back and say, whoa, here we go, let's have some popcorn. So that means that, the world is moving on without the United States. And that means that these kinds of statements are going to be either ignored, or they're going to be answered with violence, because that's all Russia knows.
Surya, I agree that we see that Putin demonstrates only terror and demonstration that he is not going to end this war, this cruel war. And Putin attacks Ukraine to make us feel that there is no peaceful place anywhere, not at our Ukrainian western regions or eastern regions, and all these massive attacks shows it, but all these attempts in the same way, Putin's attempts to make us feel afraid, they only always turn into failure, as we see. Really talking about Putin's statements considering Tomahawks and other maybe some new weapons, as Zelensky said this week, Russian dictator Putin agreed to his propaganda journalist Pavlo Zarubin that if Donald Trump gives Ukraine Tomahawks, it would lead to the destruction of positive trends in relations between Russia and the United States. But really, about what positive trends is Putin talking about?
Putin is seeing that United States is moving in the direction of becoming an authoritarian state. Same as Hungary, same as other countries that we've seen through democratic means, authoritarians come to power, Turkey, other countries. And in that situation, fundamentally, whether they may agree or disagree on any particular issue, this is similar, I'm afraid, to when we see, well, not I'm afraid, this is similar to when democracies communicate. Democracies may have disagreements, but in the end, they're kind of the same type of government. They're under pressure by their publics to resolve their conflicts peacefully, and so they try to kind of negotiate their public sentiments. Versus dictators who are there in power by strength. And they have to constantly demonstrate strength. They have different set of rules. It's not about right, it's about strength. And therefore, United States, if it is fundamentally rejects the true Western democracy and becomes this kind of a performative authoritarian state, then that's the kind of government that Putin has always been able to work with. So I think that it's really important that in this, Putin has been really identifying himself with Hitler a lot. He's been justifying Hitler's attack on Poland by, so it's not only revisionist view on history, but it's also always projection. And so to see Putin associate himself with Hitler, but hoping that he's going to be a more successful Hitler, what was was very detrimental to Hitler was when he attacked Stalin, and then the two dictator buddies became enemies. And so these the breakout is what I think historically is worrying Putin, that this escalation of words is going to go too far. Because these kinds of relationships based on strength, they always need to be managed. We have a president who is not only based on strength, but he is also, I would say that if he was driving, he would need to have like a disability sticker on his car, because this person has a very, high opinion of himself and doesn't really care about anything else. This is what allowed Trump to actually be more flexible than Putin by walking away from failed projects, because he can declare bankruptcy because Trump only cares about Trump, doesn't care about anything else. Putin is in a different situation. But if we have these two authoritarians that are not able to make things work and escalation is going to go too far, that's danger. Of course, this is generally their battlefield of words. We know Putin knows that Trump doesn't want to attack Putin, so he doesn't have to be too crazy with words. He just has to continuously remind President Trump that if you want to have good relations with Russia, let's not send Tomahawks to Russia, on Russia, against Russia. Sell Tomahawks to Russia. Perhaps in the future, great idea, Putin thinks. But I think that right now, Putin is in the stage of managing this stalker that is really wants to be like him, and trying to figure out how he can not quite turn him down, not quite give him what he wants. And the problem for Russia is that they have only strength. Like that they're using, like the stick, the caveman stick, is that's all they got. So they can show the stick, they can put the stick away, they can hide the stick behind the back, they can wave with the stick, but that's their communication method. And as long as they're not willing to put the stick down and stop fighting against Ukraine, none of this is just theater, because Trump really wants to have a peace deal. He doesn't even care what happens afterwards. And we're seeing right now his attempts at set up a peace deal in Middle East, which honestly doesn't look very solid. Nothing ever there does except war. But it's this desire to push everybody, to bully everybody, to, again, use his personal influence on everybody. It's a kind of a, I don't even know how far Donald Trump is taking us back, because this is not 1960s. I don't know. This is some kind of a emperor trying to wield his solitary power. There was a king like that in England, George III, I think. He had lost a colony. Became United States. it's kind of ironic that after 250 years, celebrating 250 years, we're basically face to face with dealing with another king. And that's why there's going to be protests. So there are, problems that Trump is experiencing because he wants to be authoritarian leader, but he doesn't live in an autocracy quite yet. Putin, on the other hand, does, but he can't stop Tomahawks. They can talk on the Soviet Russian TV about how they will destroy Tomahawks before they're ever launched because they can't stop them. But then they couldn't stop HIMARSs. They couldn't stop anything else. So Russia is going to be doing bluster. In the meantime, Ukraine is just setting it on fire.
Yes, and during this whole Putin's Valdai speech, we saw threats to all the NATO countries from Putin, but we don't see a priority response from either NATO or Trump, but we see every day, every night, more and more drones over European countries, not only Ukrainian.
While I can understand the level of disagreement, how strongly negatively Ukrainians feel about this, I feel that in the end, it is only a matter of time. Because Putin is not stopping. Everything he has shown us over and over is that he's not taking any off ramps. He just goes further with his war thing. So that means that NATO countries can pretend they're doing more than they were doing a week ago, and a week ago they were doing more than 2 weeks ago. There is an escalation. There are news stories of people in Sweden, stocking up on food, per their government suggestions, because I think European countries are pretty clearly aware of what's coming. They're not rushing into a war, but they also see that they can't ignore it. And when Germany says we're no longer at peace with Russia, I think that's a very clear statement of where things stand. And yes, it would be nice, really nice, if NATO countries decided to get involved by closing Ukraine's sky yesterday, because that would have saved lives, that would have saved business, that would have saved opportunities for Ukraine to be even stronger. But European countries are in NATO, and NATO is a defense organization. They're not an attack organization. And I think that sometimes listening to Russian propaganda, we start to think too much of the things that Russia hates. And America can't do quite as much as Russia thinks. And Europe and NATO isn't doing as much as Russia propaganda is thinking. But in the end, NATO is there to defend for very real and not imaginary purpose. And that's Russian threat. So I think that every drone, every night that goes by is a night that there's factories being built in Europe to produce ammunitions. There's a big question about Flamingo rockets, because I think Ukrainians are becoming very sophisticated to being fooled by statements like, hey, let's check back in 2 weeks. This will be over in 2 weeks. And that's why Ukrainians, again, I think also being at war, don't have the luxury of saying, oh, those are nice words, thanks so much. They actually want actions. And the same goes for what Ukraine does as it does for what anybody else does. And so I'm glad to hear that there's conversations about where are these Flamingos, rockets that have been manufactured. And if they're not showing up by a certain time, do they really exist? Is this more of a, our own, information campaign trying to show certain things that are not true? So Ukrainian society, I feel, is discriminating and is really. This is why Ukraine is right now kind of the lighthouse of the civilized world, because it is showing how people together can fight a threat. And this is a kind of a, it would be nice if we could get that kind of in a vaccine form that we could give to like Americans and to other people, because what Ukrainians are doing are really inspirational, important. And, I was the other day at a bike race, and actually it was a triathlon. And I was at a changing station hanging out, and you and I, Irina, spoke, did our last stream. And I ran into a gentleman who wore a Ukrainian, hat and socks about the building up of the bridge. I was like, oh, What's up with that? And he goes, yes. And I have a t-shirt. And he goes and he shows me a t-shirt. He's gathering money for Ukrainian drones. His name is Rex. He's from eastern Iowa. He has nothing to do with Ukraine. But after he saw what happened in Bucha, he said that he felt he could do something. And so he decided to start raising money. They raised their group. He told me raised over $25,000 for drones, which is, if those things are $500, that's like 50 drones that they raised money for. They sponsored a number of Ukrainians who are now in a very difficult situation in the United States because of this administration's lack of commitment, and people are losing their ability to have paperwork, to have jobs, because everything is being held up. It's a big problem. But there are people like Rex who just see what's going on, and even though it's not not the strength or weakness, it's the right thing to do. There are people like that in the United States who support Ukraine. There's a lot of them, and I think it's really great. So thanks to Rex and to everybody else in eastern Iowa who is raising money for Ukraine.
Yes, thank for Rex and for your support. As I can understand after our today's conversations, that such our allies among civilian people, among some politicians, European leaders, and Ukrainians, Ukrainian army and our forces, this is a recipe for our winner, and Donald Trump is not inside it, or maybe someday in future.
I think he should be part of the big pro-Ukrainian coalition. It's a good coalition. They might protect him against Putin.
And maybe Donald Trump we will protect against Putin, because we know Putin today he can love you, but next day he can attack you. That's Donald Trump.
Just like the person he's imitating, so true, so true.
Could Trump's peaceful efforts to end the war in Gaza help to impact on ending the Russian-Ukrainian war, or this another lines without any common?
It's a new/old approach of yelling at people to getting them to stop doing things, but at the same time, after Trump yelled at Israel the last time, the Israel bombed and killed 20 more people. So I'm not saying who those people were. I don't know. I just know that Trump told Netanyahu to stop, and Netanyahu didn't stop. So this is, this foreign policy being held together by vocal cords of President of the United States is feels like a long-term unsustainable policy, because if nothing else, after President Trump, there will be somebody else who may or may not be viewed the same. Probably it's not going to be viewed the same. But at the same time, if guns stop firing now, maybe they will keep not firing. The same as the peace talks in Ukraine, which is why there is no peace process in Ukraine right now, because neither side is ready to give up on what they have going on. And what's going on in Israel and with Gaza, I think, is a kind of a similar and different conversation, because you can say that Steve Witkoff, even though he's headed to Israel now, and they're hoping that they'll be able to work out a deal, which actually is Biden's deal. But, it's interesting. No, but even I saw an interview with Tony Blinken. He doesn't care who gets the credit. If there is peace is great. If you didn't, if Trump didn't let Biden's deal come through the same way that Trump didn't let aid for Ukraine to go through because he wanted it to be under his watch, and nothing happens when he's not there, and he was basically sabotaging American foreign policy, that's in the past. Now you're in charge. If you can, take the old plan and make this reality that people have been trying to do and make it actually real, that's great. I think that there's a lot of people in the United States who would much more just prefer to see peace, but question the reliability of anything done by this president. Again, Steve Witkoff so far has failed in two things, persuading Hamas and persuading Vladimir Putin. Other than that, he's done great.
Steve Witkoff is a genius in all spheres, and I say it with sarcasm. Awesome politician. Yuri, thank you very much for this conversation, for your thoughts, for your opinion, and for your time. See you next week. Take care.
My pleasure, and thanks to everyone who watches and wants to know more. We do our best, you do our best. Press like and subscribe, and we'll keep the conversation going.